The Rebbe said, we are done refining the world for Moshiach, and now we are getting the world ready for Moshiach. Can you explain this concept practically? The answer to that question is no. The Rebbe said in the last 11 months before the stroke, from Chav Ches Nissen, a lot of very strong things. The pace of change was rapid. Every 2 or 3 weeks was a new Rebbe, mamish. In the winter of Nun Beis, the Rebbe was saying, we're sitting at the table together with Moshiach. You could see the Shei Rabad, you could see the Lubavitcher, you could see the Yain HaMeshumah. All you have to do is open your eyes. The pace of change was rapid, okay? But if you know anything about the Rebbe, you know that every word out of the Rebbe's mouth, besides for all the other things, is Torah. Every word out of the Rebbe's mouth is Torah, which means it has an explanation in the parameters of the Torah that we know. In other words, when you hear the Rebbe say such words, the place to look is in Torah. What does Torah say about these kinds of ideas as it relates to us? So first of all, the Rebbe himself said that what the Rebbe said, when I said that Birurim is finished, I mean the Birurim that are necessary to bring Mashiach. But the personal Birurim, there's plenty of room for growth. I mean, just look in the mirror. There's a lot of room for improvement. I don't think there's any question, but you all understand that. So I don't know what it means, but I'm going to tell you what I think, okay? That's all it is. It's just giving you my opinions. I'm going to give you an example from something from a few generations before, okay? In the Rebbe's first Maimer, Basi Legan Tavshin Aleph, the Rebbe quoted the Rebbe Maharash. One of the things that the Rebbe said in the name of the Rebbe Maharash in that first Maimer is, and the Rebbe Maharash said, Parnasa heintik et Zeiten is kemunach bekufsa. Parnasa in our times, and the Rebbe Maharash passed away 143 years ago. It gives me a headache. He passed away 142 and a half years ago. Passed away. The Rebbe Maharash said during his physical lifetime, Parnasa nowadays is like sitting in a chest. All you have to do is open it and taking it out. Now, the Rebbe never explained what they meant, but the Rebbe quoted it a lot. He quoted it often. The Rebbe quoted it so often with so much inference that you could sort of deduce what the Rebbe was saying. And if you know anything about the life and times of the Rebbe Maharash, and it just happens to be that last week was his Yom Haledes, so it's a little bit b'hashgacha pratis. The way the Rebbe Maharash conducted himself with his Chassidim and their business is consistent with this word from the Rebbe Maharash that Parnasa b'zman hazeh is kemunach b'kufsa. It means a simple thing. If you go back 500 years, a Yid's Parnasa was connected to his elevation of sparks. Your Parnasa was connected to your Birurim. Your Neshama came into this world to elevate sparks. You were going to find those sparks by having your job and going to where those sparks were and elevating him. So if you wanted to make a living, you had to elevate sparks. And if you didn't elevate sparks, you didn't make a living. There was an inexorable connection between your material Parnasa, the money in your wallet, and your avoid in elevating the world. That's how life was. So the Rebbe Maharash said over 140 years ago, maybe 150 years ago, that's finished. Now Parnasa is free. That's the meaning of that statement. Parnasa b'zman hazeh is kemunach bekufsa. Parnasa today is like somebody sitting in a box. You want to make a living? You work and you make a living. But there's no conditions. Your Parnasa is not dependent on some other extra spiritual thing that you need to elevate the world. If you don't do it, you're not going to have your Parnasa. It's free. Now, girls, I want to ask you several questions. Number one, did you hear this quotation of the Rebbe Maharash before, or am I telling you something new? Heard it before? Never heard it before. Wow. Now I'm going to ask you a dumb question. The Rebbe Maharash said it 140 years ago. Why is the Rebbe quoting it now? Because the Rebbe Maharash wasn't saying about his generation. He was saying about the purpose of the world. From the beginning of time, there's a Birurim. And the Birurim has to do with many things. When a person eats food, they're Mavada Birurim. When a person davens, they're Mavada Birurim. Even when a person learns Torah, Mavada Birurim. And when a person walks out into the street and gets on the train and goes to work, he's Mavada Birurim, says the Rebbe Maharash, no more. He's not saying you shouldn't go to work. He's not saying you shouldn't be mevada birudim, but the panasa, your livelihood is not conditional on your birudim, and now it's free. Do you understand the concept or not? I need someone to say yes, even one person, even if you don't mean it. I appreciate that, yes, sincere or insincere. Now take that concept and apply it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe said birudim is finished. What the Rebbe is saying is just like the Rebbe Marash said. Until his times, if you wanted to eat bread, you had to be mevada birudim because your bread was dependent on the birudim. It's no longer true. The Rebbe took the same concept. You see what I'm doing? I'm associating the familiar with the unfamiliar. I'm correlating. I'm taking something from the past and using it as a way of explaining what the Rebbe is saying. That the Rebbe says birudim is finished means that the birudim necessary to bring Mashiach. Just like until the Rebbe Marash's times, your panasa depended on it. Now our panasa depends on it, but our shlichus depends on it. The food we eat, the clothing we wear, those birudim are finished. The avodah nowadays is to makal the Mashiach Tzidkenu, to greet Mashiach Tzidkenu. So this, what I just did was gave you an explanation for an idea. I think what I'm saying is true. Certainly about the Rebbe Marash. As it applies to us, that's a bit of an interpretation. But I want to tell you this achakal, the net result of it, okay? The history of the world is very complicated. And the history of the world is filled with examples of forces coming into this world, fighting against Kedusha. Fighting against Kedusha. Right? Yimach Shemam, Hitler and Stalin fought against Kedusha in their way. We don't say Yimach Shemaya about Napoleon, but believe me, had he won, we would be saying Yimach Shemaya about Napoleon. Napoleon fought against Kedusha in his way. Titus fought against Kedusha in his way. Nebuchadnezzar fought against Kedusha in his way. Sanchedav Melech Asher fought against Kedusha in his way. Pari Melech Mitzrayim fought against Kedusha in his way. And so on. And the church fought against Kedusha in its way. The Islamic faith, there's been many klippas that fought against Yiddishkeit. Now why the Rebbe should do it? Huh? Because he's a mean Eibishter, that's why. Only one problem with this mean Eibishter, you can't buy a new one. We're stuck with him. Yeah. Why the Eibishter do it? You know what the answer is? It's a birur. It's a birur. These struggles, these challenges, these alamas vestadim, and some of them were very severe. What's called in our culture nisyonis, they were mamish tests. They could not be overcome. Derech HaTeva was the way the Eibishter set up our avodas habirudim. So just like the Rebbe Marash said, Parnas is no longer a part of the game. The Rebbe is saying, fighting with Goyim is no longer a part of the game. Fighting with Ilm Haz is no longer a part of the game. In other words, in the olden days, when an anti-Semite came along and it caused Yiddish Yitzaris, there was a koyach to that klipa. You know what the koyach to that klipa? Because that klipa was there for us to fix. That's finished. Practically speaking, this means if a Yid will teach a Goy, he will listen. Because the idea that when the Yid has his agenda and the Goy has a different agenda, the only reason the Eibishter gave a Goy a different agenda for the sake of birudim. And just like from 140 years ago, Parnasa was no longer connected to birudim, your interactions with the Goy is no longer connected to birudim. It's a question of teaching him. I have a student, a very smart guy. He knows much more about geopolitics than I do. He's a student of mine from 36 years ago. I haven't spoken to him in a few decades. And we pushed it, spent the Shabbos together. We had a wonderful time. He knows everything going on in the world. And he's an anti-Semite. I mean, he hates some Jews like really bad. You know, the leftists and so on. He's very upset. And he's very smart. He's very informed. He's very articulate. He's very strong in his days. When he was in yeshiva, he was the same way. So I said to him, you know, I don't want to argue with you, but I don't think you're right. I don't think these are bad people. I think these are people who it's our job to teach. Because if we'll teach, they'll listen. Not because we're better teachers, but because the world is ready for us to teach. And he became so quiet. He really listened. I was very surprised. He didn't argue. He heard me. I think that's the answer to this question. The question was, the Rebbe said we're done refining the world for Mashiach, and now We're getting Reif Mashiach, we're getting the world Reif Mashiach in the Lashon Harav. Kabbalah's Pnei Mashiach said, "Can you bepel mamish to greet the face of Mashiach bepel mamish?" Can you explain this concept practically? That's what I did. And I did something very unusual. I gave you a mashal from the past, a mashal of something which is familiar. At least some of you have heard it before. The Rebbe said it many times. This quote from the Rebbe Marash: "Parnasa bezman hazeh kemunach b'kufse." Parnasa is no longer part of the birurim, and the Rebbe says your interaction with Elam Haz is no longer part of the birurim. The whole world. The world is ready for light, but we have to bring that light to the world. Any questions or comments?